Let's talk today about getting agreement on improving the UX. I am hearing these days that many people who work in UX are finding themselves feeling like they have to fight all the time to do their job. And this saddens me. We shouldn't, the work is hard enough. We shouldn't have to feel like we're fighting to do it. But the fight seems to come from the fact that the people they work with, the peers, the stakeholders that they have to work with on a regular basis, just aren't as invested in this idea of making great user experiences as they are. Now, to some extent, this makes some amount of sense in that um, we're the UX people, they're not the UX people. At least that's the way it's been framed for a lot of folks. Um, but this is more than just, you go do your thing and we'll be over here. This is more like the peers and the stakeholders are treating the improvement of UX as a burden. That this is actually something that makes their life more difficult. They don't see it as a responsibility, and the result is that we end up in fights. We end up having to push back. We end up having to fight for this notion that um, there is that UX somehow is is not natural but needs to occur, and therefore um, we get ourselves, always feeling like we're battling, and that's demoralizing for a lot of people, and rightly so. And uh, there's been a lot of talk lately about how this is just difficult, um, and part of this is our doing. We have let the world sort of position UX work as cleanup work. We're about making things pretty. We're about cleaning it up. Part of this is our constant fixation with visuals, which makes it look like that's what our priorities are. We when we hire people, we make them show a portfolio filled with their visuals. We sort of present the visuals first. All of these things sort of give people the perspective that UX is really about making things pretty, and that means that anything that's sort of outside that spectrum is difficult. But some of this isn't hasn't to do with us. There's just this overall perception that design is something you do at the end. It's something you do to clean up some the way things look. It's presentation layer, and therefore it doesn't affect the business or the technology choices that are made. Um, and that turns out not to be true. And then suddenly teams discover that their customers are really frustrated, that their customers are struggling with the user experiences they've been delivering, which have not been ideal user experiences. And then the dictum comes down: can you make it less terrible? And by the way, we have no time to do that because this thing has to go out right away. And that sort of make it less terrible notion is the thing that makes us really feel like, our work isn't valued, that our work is difficult. And this is the condition that a lot of people find themselves in just a little too often. And it's not an ideal place. It's not where we want to be. And part of this is that our peers and stakeholders, the people who are telling us that improving the UX is not the highest priority, that it's the thing that comes at the end of the project, that's the thing that the best we're going to do is just to make it a little less terrible. That these people don't really have a clear connection between what happens when we deliver a poor UX and the business challenges. And again, part of this is that we don't talk about the fact that first, everything you ship has a user experience. We make it sound like user experiences only happen when UX people are involved, and that's not true. Uh, User experiences happen no matter who involved. And chances are, if there are no UX people involved, that the experience is a poor user experience. And that poor user experience does have an impact on the organization downstream. It's going to make things harder. It's debt that we are creating. But the problem with creating that debt is that it's invisible most of the time until it's too late. And unless we do a good job of making the connection between the poor UX that we're delivering today and the business challenges that we're going to face in the future, unless we can connect those things up well, this is going to continue to be a struggle because we're not helping people see that there are outcomes to the decisions that they are making that are not necessarily the outcomes that they wanted. And that is what gets us into trouble all the time. And so, because we haven't made a good connection between poor UX and future business challenges, because that connection hasn't been made highly visible, um, it can become a battle to get people to let us do the work that we were hired to do. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, which is how do we how do we fix this? How do we get this to happen? And this is sort of the crux of um, starting to become more proactive in our UX practice, starting to become more strategic. When we are just uh, individual contributors, and I talked about this a bit last year. Um, when you are individual contributors uh, in a team, you are in this reactive mode where people give you assignments and they say, okay, get this done. There's probably a deadline involved. So there's an assignment and a deadline. You bust your butt to get that assignment done during the deadline, and then as soon as you're done, there's another assignment right behind it and another assignment right behind it. And you're just in this mode where you're reacting to all these assignments. And it's sort of uh, uh, the wicked stepsisters are just assigning you cleaning chores to get things done all the time, and that is not satisfactory um, to anyone who's involved in that. The way to get out of that is to start to make a switch, to start to make a shift to being in more of a leadership role. And this is where there's a lot of confusion because we don't talk enough about the fact that leadership and management are separate things. A manager is someone who has a team of direct reports for whom their job is to make sure those direct reports are as effective as possible. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is leadership. And a UX leader is a person who has a vision of what a better user experience could be like. And leaders lead through their vision. Whereas managers are appointed by the organization, leaders become a leader when a follower falls in love with the vision and says, you know what, I want to be part of that too. And so UX leadership is not something that's appointed in the organization. Any one of us can do it. The fact that you are here means that you are either already a UX leader or you are likely to be one in the near future. And the way that you're going to get there is by having this vision of what better UX could be, what that improvement could be. So here we are talking about improving the UX. We have to have a very clear vision of what that improvement will be like. And when we talk about having a clear vision, what we're really talking about is this idea that a we can think about where we are today, what it is our team is producing, what our organization is delivering. And what we can see is that this idea of today lives on a timeline. And there's some point in the future. That point is we can pick any sort of arbitrary date. Let's say we're going to go a year into the future. And if we did nothing differently over that year, it's basically going to be the same UX that we have today. Whatever the frustrations are that users are having, whatever the process is that we're producing this, if we do nothing different, we're going to end up in this same place a year from now. And if we think that the design that we're producing today is not particularly good, this doing nothing different, we're going to be at the same place a year from now that we are today, except probably with more debt, right? More UX debt, more technical debt, things that we will have to fix and clean up in the future because we've just produced a year's worth of that stuff there. So what do? We come up with a better way of doing it. We come up with something that says, hey, we can do better than this. And we position that as something very different, right? This is our point of doing better. This is our idea of what it would look like if we were actually better at what we did. And the difference between this point of what it's like today, or what it will be like a year from now if we do nothing different, and what it will be like if we do something different, that becomes our vision. And that vision is what the leader leads with, right? We have to paint this vision. We have to make a clear distinction as to what this vision is, how it's different than where we will be a year from now, and then what we're going to have to do differently to get to that point. What is the journey that our team is going to have to take to get to this point? Now, a lot of UXers make the mistake of trying to sell process. They try to come in and sell this idea of we need to do, well, the first thing we're going to do is personas. We're going to talk about why that's a bad idea in April. But we're gonna first thing we're gonna do is personas, and then we're gonna, whatever our second step of our process is. We've got some lovely diamond here that's an abstract shape that gets us there. But we're going to sort of define what we're doing, and then some sort of discovery maybe, and we'll then create some wireframes, and we'll deliver those to the team who will then execute them exactly as we um, uh, uh, drew them out. Only, and then someplace in here we're going to do a bunch of validation, usability testing, uh, and all of this is this sort of notion that there's a right way to do things. But the problem with this right way to do things is that it's it's taxing, it's slow, it creates pressures on our peers and stakeholders because they don't know what they're getting, and it's easy to push away and just say, you know what, we got to today through a process and it didn't involve any of this, so let's just keep going on that. And the problem with this is that you can't you can't sell the process. You have to sell the vision. The vision has to be about what's different between what we will deliver here and here. So we have to focus on the outcomes. If we do a great job on whatever this vision is for, how will that improve people's lives? We have to understand the outcomes, and we have to understand the outcomes that we're going to get if we don't do a great job, right? What are the outcomes that are going to happen if we don't do the job that we want to do? So the vision has to have a clear picture of the difference of these two things. And we have to get people excited about the outcomes. If we don't get people excited about the outcomes, the way we're going to get to those outcomes, it doesn't matter one whit. So the so this notion of making sure that we are painting the difference between the outcomes, how this makes people's lives better, how this continues to propagate life that is not desirable. It's that difference that we have to talk about, that we have to describe. And that's where we have to start. And we can't talk about our process until we talk about the outcomes. And so that's absolutely the sort of first step. Have we painted a picture of what improving the UX will look like? Is it a clear difference between what we get if we did nothing different versus what we would get if we did a fantastic job that improved people's lives? Do we have a clear understanding? And is it so compelling that everybody on the team walks away thinking, we have to do this. This is what we have to achieve? Because that opens the door to the conversations about how are we going to achieve it. Do we get the vision that we want? Do we paint the picture of the vision by getting to that moment? So that's the first step, right? Leaders lead through vision. If you want to lead change in your organization, you better have a vision of what that looks like. So that's uh, um, uh, that's the first sort of piece to it. Um, the second thing is that we have to make sure that whatever that vision looks like, um, uh, whatever that uh, uh, those outcomes, those different outcomes look like, It has to be a win for everybody involved, right? If anybody thinks that this is not a win, that this is somehow going to make their life harder, that this is not worth the change, they're going to push back. If they don't see how they personally or politically benefit, they're going to push back on this. Now, benefit is very much a negotiable thing, right? We can talk to benefit in lots of different ways, and people make sacrifices, they make trade-offs, they make compromise to get long-term benefit all the time. But we have to be clear as to what that benefit looks like, and it has to be something that everybody feels like they're going to win at. So there's we have to understand how politics work. And when people think of politics, what they often think about is the conflict that comes when people are not seeing the benefit of the change, right? And what we end up with is a phenomena known as an opinion war. And we were just talking about this past week in the How to Win Stakeholders and Influence Decisions program. And the challenge is this, right? In an opinion war, it's one person's opinion versus another's. And there's a conflict in between these opinions. And the opinion of this person is formed completely based on their life's experience. Everything in their life has led them to this opinion as to what to do next, right? This is their judgment of what the right thing to do is at this point. And their experience is made up of everything they know, everything they've done, everything that they've been taught, all the lessons they've been taught over the years. That leads them to form the judgment. And that's true for the person over here, except that they have a different experience. They were taught different things. They know different things. They've done different things. And in order for this person, let's call person A, person B. So in order for person A to convince person B that that A's judgment is the better judgment to make in this situation, A's opinion is the opinion we should be going with. What we're asking person B to do is to literally ignore all the experience, knowledge, everything they've done, everything they've ever been taught, and to take instead person A's knowledge and done and taught on faith, because it doesn't match the experience that they have. If it matched, this would be a no-brainer. But it doesn't match. And as a result, we get into what we call opinion wars. And the thing about opinion wars is they are unwinnable if all we do is focus on opinions. So this is where data comes in. And data is informed by the work we do in research. So this is why I think that too many UX people overemphasize on design and underemphasize on research, and then they find themselves in conflict. Because when you overemphasize on design, you're making design judgments that aren't based on research, but are based on your experience, your knowledge, what you've done before, what you've been taught. So you're making all those types of judgments, and you're now in an opinion war with someone who doesn't share that experience, that knowledge, that haven't done the same things, haven't been taught the same things. And you get pushback. And the pushback happens because you're in the world of opinion wars. And this happens because we overemphasize design, which is a process of judgment, and we underemphasize research, which is a process of data collection. And then we get ourselves into trouble. So one of the key things that has to happen here is we have to focus on better research. And in order to focus on better research, we have to understand what is actually happening in the world of the people that we work with. Because they, like us, are also in an environment that favors being tactical and reactive. They are probably not as free to work strategically as they would like to be in almost all situations. They are getting priorities from somebody else. Now, what happens here is that priorities come from externalities in many cases, right? There's an org chart, and the people at the top of the org chart are dictating priorities. We need something that's going to generate revenue by the end of the quarter, so that's our priority. We need to ship something that we can sell, that we can generate revenue. So that becomes a priority. We have other externalities like customers. Give the customer a tie and a little hat. And the customer, we're going to call these executives here. The customer has what they perceive are needs, but because they don't know how to talk about needs, they translate those needs into solutions. And they say, build me the solution. What I really need is data export. So deliver me data export. And so suddenly that becomes a priority. Or we have some sort of noise in the marketplace. There are, the marketplace has competitors who do things on their own without talking to us first, which then translates into sales pressure. And that competitive parity becomes a priority. So we have different things that work their way into priorities, and then sitting on the receiving end of all of this is our poor product manager or dev lead or other people who now are being told that these things are the most important things. And then here we come talking about the UX again. And we're saying UX is important. And they're looking at that and comparing it to all of these different things and saying, you know what? Something has to give. UX has to give. And that gets us into trouble. But that gets us into trouble because we haven't matched it up with the external priorities that have come down the pike. And because we haven't matched that up, we are in competition with those priorities instead of saying, wait a second, if we can uncover something that customers would really value, we can help you with the revenue priorities easily, because if they value it, they'll pay more. If we can translate solutions back into what the actual need is, we can help you navigate the customer priorities. If we can really uncover what is missing in everybody's experience, we can actually counter competitive parity by being best of class. And the thing that everybody else wants to become parity about, because we have built out our understanding. We can do all of these things with better research. And if we understand the priorities of our stakeholders, of our peers, where are they getting pressure from? We are more likely to be able to say, hey, this is going to be a win-win, because you are going to be able to satisfy these priorities at the same time that we make the UX better. And so this is where we need to step up our game. We need to be able to talk to each of these priorities. Last week, I talked about something that we teach in our Win Stakeholders and Influence Decisions program, which is the question about where's this priority coming from? If you're hitting resistance because a stakeholder is telling you this is not the most important thing, you can then say, well, what is the most important thing and where is that coming from? And start to say, okay, let me help you with that. Last week we talked about a servant leadership point of view. And in the servant leadership point of view, the first thing you do is you ask the question, how can I help you succeed? Well, in the instance of our stakeholder who is being told that they have to match these priorities that are coming from other places other than, their own origination, we can help them succeed by jumping in and helping them get to success in each of these things. But we have to know what this is. This is really sort of the key of what my work has been for the last decade, which is understanding how to help UX leaders get to a point where we are helping them succeed. But you can't do this when you're in this reactive mode. You have to jump into this position of leadership. You have to start painting a vision. The vision that you paint has to address the priorities. It has to look like a win-win. And when we do that, we're going to have the research that supports it. So we have to move forward on building out better and improved research that tells us more about the experiences that we can be delivering our customers. and the users and everybody who benefits when we produce better user experiences. So we have to go to outcomes first. We have to have a clear picture of what the difference is between uh, uh, between our vision of the outcomes and where we will be if we did nothing different. That vision needs to not sell process, but to sell the outcome differences. That's where we need to start. Get everybody bought in on that. We need research to counter the opinion wars, to make sure that we are not just trying to convince people that their life's experience is somehow not as good as our life's experience. And we need to focus on really this idea that there are priorities that are coming through the organization. And when we're in reactive mode, we are just downstream of those. We wait for the stakeholder to tell us what it is we're going to do. But instead, we have to get ahead of those. We have to understand what those priorities are, what those priorities are going to be in the future. When we do that, we suddenly are teaming as a peer to the stakeholder, not as someone who works for them doing their cleanup work. And when we get to that point, we're now in a place where we can talk about how to improve the user experience, because we're improving the user experience by actually addressing the key priorities that are coming down the pipeline. Jared here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you'll get more videos like this. If you have any comments, questions, or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, consider joining our Leaders of Awesomeness community. It's completely free, home to over 50,000 UX leaders who regularly share questions, ideas, inspiration about their experiences. The link is in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.